What's going on, boys? It is day number 20 of reading through the book of Luke. I hope that everybody is having a great Monday, a great day on this Martin Luther King Day. We are going to be looking at two passages in this chapter, two of which are questions that Jesus is asked by the chief priests and the elders and some of the Pharisees, as well as some spies that are sent towards Jesus in order that they may try to catch him off guard and try and trick him into a reason why they should arrest him. Because up to this point, as we've seen from Jesus going out and healing people on Sabbath and performing all these miracles and even eating with sinners like Zacchaeus and Matthew, they are very angry because they don't understand why he is doing this, why he is eating with unclean people. And so we have two sections that are going to kind of help us to understand why this is true. And Jesus uses very powerful questions to kind of respond back. Instead of giving a direct answer, he responds like with a question that, in at least the first section, it doesn't really get answered in a way. And so we're going to look at that and kind of break it down a little bit more and kind of what I felt was on my spirit when I read this. So chapter 20 is a long one, but we're just going to look at the sections about Jesus's authority being questioned and then about taxes being paid to Caesar, about what they should be done. And so verses 1 through 8, this is what it says. It says, "One day as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple courts and proclaiming the good news, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came up to him. 'Tell us, by what authority are you doing these things?' They said, 'Who gave you this authority?' He replied, 'I will also ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it from heaven or of human origin?' They discussed it among themselves and said, 'If we say from heaven, he will ask, why don't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, all people will stone us, because they are persuaded that John was a prophet.' So they answered, 'We don't know where it is from.' Jesus answered, 'Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things.'" So John's baptism, we go back to the birth of John being the child of Zechariah and Elizabeth all the way back in Luke chapter 1. And what we learned is that while John is actually the cousin of Jesus, being that Elizabeth was a relative of Mary. And I went back and I actually read parts of Luke 1, and I'll read them for those who may not know. But from one of the songs that Zechariah sang about his son, he says, and you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare his way for him, to give his people knowledge and salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and guide the shadow of path, and guide our feet in the path of peace." So when the chief priests and the elders are asked this question, they are startled. They don't know what to respond with. But we know from Scripture that John was a prophet. He was a messenger, a previewer of Christ to speak the good news. We learned that the Holy Spirit was actually implanted within John as he was being born. We look back to what was made promise to Zechariah from the angel Gabriel about their prayers being answered. So what do we take from this? What is the overall kind of message we're getting here about this interaction that Jesus has about John's baptism? Well, we can learn that Christ seeks the broken and the weak. This is kind of a direct parallel to what the chief priests and the elders have noticed about Jesus eating with sinners and performing these miracles, doing all these healings on Sabbath, and performing just all of these different signs. But also that Christ already presented the reasons for how he has revealed whose authority he has. We know now that, Jesus' authority, he had his own authority because he was God in the flesh. So he's like, my authority is from myself. He's like, I am the son of, like, I am, God in the flesh. I have authority on heaven and on earth. God has, did the authority. We look at Jesus' baptism by John, that, the heavens open and God the Father says, "This is my son whom I'm well pleased." Listen to him. And so what we learn from this is that John was a prophet. And you look at the two answers that that is discussed by the chief priests and the elders. They said, well, if it's from heaven, Jesus is going to say, why don't you believe him? So if we learn that it is from heaven, that, they should have believed him, that the only people that did believe John were people who were broken. So prostitutes, tax collectors, sinners who recognize that they are unworthy. So these chief priests and the elders who think that they have high authority because, they have more wealth and they know the scriptures in and out. They think they are the ones that should know it better. And they think they're the ones who are the closest to God, when in fact they are actually the ones lowest. They're the ones that are farthest from God because they really don't, obey the God's command in the way that they should. They understand the law, they understand the things that have been spoken, but they're not living it out. They're not living it out in a way that someone should. And so what do we do with this? We often expect things to move in our way. So we often expect things to happen in our way. We think, if this just happens this way, it should happen my way. When 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really happen that way. And so again, we look at the question here. It says, "I will ask you a question. Tell me, John's baptism, was it of heaven or human origin?" And it's so much so, thought about that there's no answer given. So Jesus says, well, if you can't tell me what it is, it's like, you should know this. You're the chief priest and tax collectors. You should know this. He's like, if you can't tell me what it is, he's like, why would I tell you my authority? And this kind of raises a lot of eyebrows to say, that's interesting that these chief priests and these elders, the ones who are supposed to know the scriptures, don't know about John. They don't know about John the Baptist. They don't know about his baptism. So it's just like, well, do they even know what they're talking about then? And in reality, they really don't. So John was a prophet that presented a light for Jesus' eventual ministry. So we learn that John was a prophet that presented, the good news of salvation being through the forgiveness of sins. He was the one that drew people out into the wilderness to say, hey, this is what you have to do. You have to repent. You have to, present yourself to God. And so this is a just incredible encounter that we had, that is had here. And I think a lot of times we think that the people who are the most high in power are the ones who have it all together. They think that they're the ones who know the most about something, when in reality, just a simple question about something in history can kind of stop us in our tracks, can kind of stop them from saying, I don't know what to expect. And so this kind of leads into the second question that Jesus is asked. This time it's not by the chief priests and the elders themselves. They actually send spies. They're like, well, maybe if we send these people out first, we can catch them off guard. Because the ultimate goal of these chief priests and elders is to get Jesus to kind of, respond with something that goes against the law. So they can say, hey, this is what we charge you with. You were being arrested, so we can have you, arrested and taken away. But Jesus, already knowing what's going to happen, responds with a just powerful speech to them. So the spies, they come up to him, and this is about paying taxes. Taxes, we know, taxes are still something that exists today, something that we really don't like to do. But we're going to read verse 21 through 25. So these spies had come in order that they may catch him off guard and have something to charge Jesus with, to arrest him. So the spies questioned him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" He saw them through their duplicity and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription are on it?" "Caesar's," they replied. He said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God." To God, what is God's. And this, you can imagine this moment kind of silences the whole crowd. They're just like, wow, like that is powerful. So what does this overall encounter mean? What does this mean? Jesus says, give back to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean to give back to, a person in the leader of the government, to them, and to also what is God's? Well, I think what we could take from this is that God allows order to exist within a nation. A nation's order must be in respect to him for their full dependency. So nations exist. Think about the world today. There are, I don't even remember the amount, there's like 200 nations in the world, all of them of which have their own government, have their own ways of setting laws and rules. But, most of them are in respect with, you shouldn't do this, you don't do this, you have access to this, you have access to this. Think about the U.S. Think about our pledge. When we say it, we say under God. We speak this in a way that we understand that while we are a nation with rules and rights and stuff, we understand that God is the ultimate one who is over everything. He is that higher power that exists above everything else. So Jesus is saying here, he says, give back to, whatever the power is that is here on earth that is ahead of you. Give back to them what is theirs. and give back to God what is God. So whatever God gives you, our response should be say, God, I am grateful for that. I'm going to give it back to you because I trust that you're going to supply me with stuff, anything in life. There are things that we think that within this world that we have to give back because we think it's the right thing to do, or with our financial status, we think that, we can't trust that, maybe someone of higher power is going to actually, do what they say they're going to do. And so this balance back and forth between, worldly power and godly power can be kind of misdirecting to some of us. So what do we do with this? So whatever taxes or bills are required, they must be paid. And then what you receive should be returned to God. So think about it like this. You have all of, the jobs that exist in our nation, and the taxes that come in. Why do we pay taxes? Well, because that's what keeps people in order. It allows us to say that we can hold you responsible because, you are working, but you're also paying back to say that you are, actually paying attention to what is being, taught to you. And you're saying that, if I want to be able to be a respectful individual and I want to be someone who can be wealthy and someone who can be, trusted, I'm going to, I'm going to give back to what I've been given. And I know this probably is a lot of, it may not make sense, but just understand that Jesus' response is something that some people may say is controversial just because he says, why would you give back to Caesar's what is Caesar's when yet God has everything? God gives you everything. Well, again, I think that, I even wrote this down on the side of my Bible, that order can exist on earth in respect to God. So I think that God allows the governments of our world to exist in order that there may be order over nations, in order that there may be order on earth. We think back to the very beginning in the Bible, to Genesis, when man is given authority over the earth to have dominion, to multiply, and to create many things, to name all these things. That's kind of what's happening here. Man is given dominion over the earth. Man is the ultimate, outlier of all the other species. And the job of that is for man to create this system that allows everything to work together. God has given us that much, power to say, look, he says, your dominion is to control the earth, create this system of power, which we refer to as the government, that has a series of rules, laws, expectations, things you have to do in order that you can receive more. Because if you're not going to obey the law, then why would, someone expect to give you something? You think that, if you break the law or you don't pay taxes, that, there's a consequence. The same thing applies with God. If you don't give to God what is God's, you'll start to see things, not really working out for you. And then if you don't obey God and don't trust God, then in the end, judgment comes. Judgment comes. It's the same thing that applies. You commit a crime, there you go, and there's a judge that decides what happens to you, and you have to face that consequence. That's the same thing that's kind of happening here. And so I know this is probably a lot of, it's been going all over the place, but just understand that Jesus is telling us that he has full authority and that our trust should be put in him. And whatever Jesus commands us to do, whatever particular, a speech he gives us or advice that he gives us, it shouldn't just be taken as, oh, okay, well, that's great. I'm still going to go my own way. Jesus is saying, whatever I speak to you, it must be lived out. It must be played out in order for you to understand who I am. Think back to the question that is given by Jesus to the direct chief priests and the elders. He says, by John's baptism, he's like, you should know this. He's like, basically saying, you should know this. You read the scriptures. You should know this. And if we're not able to understand why things have happened, how can Jesus sit there and say that we can know who he is? So again, understand why things have happened, understand how the series of events have taken place, and then we can begin to understand why Jesus had authority, why he spoke the things that he did. And we don't want to be like the chief priests and elders and say, well, Jesus was going on eating with these unclean people. That was his mission. His mission was to come and to make dead people alive. His mission was to come heal the sick people. This was all sinners. So this was, tax collectors, prostitutes, adulterers, criminals, all of these people he came to make right because they tried to find other ways to make themselves better, but it did not. And when we try to be perfect, we find ourselves being the farthest apart from God. We find ourselves being, driven further apart from Christ. And we really don't want that. So I hope this message encouraged you. This was a lot, and it probably didn't make sense in some areas, but just know that the things that Jesus speaks here, we apply in our own lives today. Think about the ways that we have rules and systems in our own nation. So I hope this encouraged you. I'm going to read from our daily prayer book. We're in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 5, and our title is called Wise Counsel. It says, if any of you needs wisdom, you should ask God for it. He is generous to everyone and will give you wisdom without criticizing you. I ask for your wisdom, God. Please help me to know your ways. Every day I have decisions I need to make that require discernment beyond my years. Help me to be as perceptive as you are. Help me to rely upon your knowledge and your trust and your understanding. Thank you that you do not withhold me from because of who I am. Thank you for generously giving me what I need each day. So I think if there is a question that we have about something that's occurring around us, something that may not make sense to us, I don't believe we should keep it to ourselves. I believe we should bring it to God and say, God, I don't understand what this means. I don't understand what this says. This particular law that says this, or this command, like I'm not really sure what it means, or this person said to this to me, I've seen these things occur, I'm just so confused, I don't really know what this means, because God is the one who ultimately knows everything. He's the one that knows everything about anything in the world, but he's also the one that knows everything about you. So if there's a question, bring it to him, because he'll answer it for us, because he knows that we need answers. We need things to be directed for us. We need things to be set in order for us. And there are just some things that we can't do without him. There's a lot of things we can't do without him. But I pray that if we were to have a question, that we would look at what Jesus says to these people that he encounters. He said, just look at what is already here and follow by it. And you will start to see everything else fall in place. That's today's word. I hope you guys have had a great Monday, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.